Alright, hi everybody. Coming up to the pinnacle PvP here, I want to share my thoughts. Let you guys know what I think of the units and tier them out. See if my predictions about what units make it in the top end up actually being there. Before we get started, I think it is important to walk through my definition for each of these tiers. So we'll start at the top. S tier for me is a must include in lineup to be competitive. This is not merely the best tank, right? If that tank is required to be on your roster to be competitive, then yes, that tank will be an S tier. But if that tank only goes into one good team and you could do without that team or whatever else, it may not be up there. A is kind of that not, meta defining, but very good for their role. You definitely want these. B tier are often at a similar power level to A tier, but if they have substitutes, right, there are other units that do the same thing at about the same power level where you could kind of pick and choose. They might end up here in B tier. C tier, passable but not ideal, right? These are the units that this unit is kind of the worst of this category, but it does the trick. I can, slot it into the team to make the fourth that I need, but it's not really what I'm gunning for. D tier, ideally you never play these. If you're super unlucky or free to play, you might be stuck with one of these units, but ideally, these are no longer on your lineup. So these are going to be the rankings. We're just going to run through it in order. So let's start at the top here with Momon. I'm going to talk briefly about each of the units as I go through them as well. So Momon, passable but not ideal. For the most part, single damage dealers, chase, assist is not in this season. It's just not a very good comp. Yes, Momon can do some good damage, but in the PvP meta we currently have, not well positioned. The Mage Albedo, also in C tier. Free unit, it's the weaker of the AoE mages. Passable, but not ideal. You can use her in place of some other units like Demiurge or Evil Eye in your AoE mage comp. Tank Albedo, A tier. Top tier for role. Very, very good tank. One thing that she does unique to tanks is the taunts, and the AoE taunt is very, very good in some situations, in some lineups. Very good unit. Often overlooked. At 6-star, especially good. By the way, these lineups all assume that the units are at 6 stars for the most part. I will talk about big differences between units if they have, if there's a huge difference between 6-star and not 6-star. Albedo, there is a big difference. The 6-star for Albedo is huge. Getting that shield at the start for everybody, very big. Next up, we have Mare, S tier. Very, very good. The Earth Seed being able to control the turn meter and consistently knock your enemy back from the start of the battle is very strong. In addition to just being a very strong damage dealer, I'd say Mare is a must include. People definitely ban him. Next up, we have Gazef. Gazef is going into C tier. Passable, not ideal. Good counter unit. Probably borderline B tier. But yeah, he's very niche and definitely, not as good as some of the other counter units. Next up, we have Sebis going into D tier. I wish he was really good. I'd love to build him. Maybe he has some niche, versus a counter meta being able to come in and one-shot units and just knock them out from full health. But it seems to me like you basically need him at 6-star, maxed arc light, maxed everything to even have that be a possibility, right? So I think he'd be pretty tough to build. I don't really ever see anybody running Sebas, so he's in D tier. Next up, we have Hamsky. I'm gonna put him in D tier. Has some synergies with some units, particularly Freeze Lizard, but ideally you don't really want to be running Hamsky, in my opinion. But he's definitely good. She, I believe it's a she. Anyway, next up we have Brain. B tier, very good. Close to A tier, I would say. Brain is pretty integral to the counter team comps. But I would say that Brain and one other counter unit are probably on pretty equal power level, where you could play one or the other in your counter lineup with a few other units. So Brain is going to be at B tier. Next up, we have Tank Shell tier. I'm going to put her at A tier. She, if you don't have 6-star Albedo, is obviously very good for providing turn 0 damage mitigation to your whole team. However, she also just does some other things that are pretty unique to the tank role. Particularly her ability to knock people's turn meter back with her defense down ability, I believe, and then granting, lifesteal and stuff, being able to help heal up your allies is somewhat unique. I mean, all the tanks provide some amount of shielding and healing for your allies, but she's a little bit unique in that she can heal herself up too. Next up, we have the Chase Aura. I'm going to put at C tier. Again, similar to Momon, one of those single target damage dealers. Chase Assist is not super hot in this meta. Can still do good damage. If you've got the team, you can potentially still play it and get some good wins. I've been beat by some Momons for sure. But yeah, in general, not that great. So Aura in C tier. Next up, we have Bleed Cocytus, also at C tier. Potentially some niche use versus the counter meta, providing bleed, but I think there are some other more effective ways to combat the counter meta than Cocytus. Yeah, passable, not ideal. Next up, we have Demiurge, who I'm going to put in B tier. There are a few AoE mages for the OTK mage team. You typically run Renner and then 2 or 3 mages. I typically run 2 mages and 1 stunner just to hedge a little bit. I usually run Mare as one of the mages, and then the second one could be Demiurge, Evil Eye, Albedo, Idle Shell tier, right? There's a few, so I think Demiurge is kind of a little bit more replaceable in that lineup compared to Mare and some others. Next up, we have Evil Eye. Same exact thing, Demiurge and Evil Eye. I'm almost tempted to put them up a little bit higher simply because they are the 3rd fastest units in the game. So the speed of units goes Renner at first, Maid, Yuri at 2nd, and then Demiurge and Evil Eye are tied at 3rd. These 2, similar damage output, same speed, perfectly interchangeable. You could run them both. You could run one on your team. It doesn't matter. They're both going to put out crazy damage, but replaceable. Next up, we have Maid Yuri. This is probably going to be the first pretty controversial one, but I'm going to put her at S tier. Speed still really matters in the meta, right? And so, as I said, Renner is the 1st fastest unit in the game. So, spoiler alert, we'll just do it right now. Renner's coming up to S tier as well. So, Renner's the fastest unit. If your opponent bans your Renner and they have a Yuri and you don't, you automatically lose the speed game, right? And that's not good. Especially with Yuri being now especially good on the stun comps. I'd say Yuri is pretty much S tier at this point. Probably a little controversial, but that's my reasoning. Next up, we have Gagarin. I'd say Gagarin at B tier. Gagarin is definitely, I'd say, a little bit more on par with Brain, a little bit better than Gazif, surprisingly. I mean, she counters when other people get hit, not just herself, and she can like AOE counter and stuff. She does some good stuff. But yeah, also kind of replaceable. Next one, we have Zaryusu Shasha, the lizard. Freeze Lizard is S tier. This guy is busted. This is another one that at 6-star makes a decent bit of difference. Being able to AoE dispel 2 buffs on the enemy team is humongously powerful, especially in the current meta. The counter team is heavily reliant on buffs, on building up like Yuri's stacks of buffs and stuff like that, to basically get good damage output. You know, use Cocytus's second ability to buff up allies, use Touch Me to grant the like warrior shield thing to people, to your counter units and stuff like that. So the counter team is pretty reliant on buffs. And so being able to both freeze and get rid of all of those buffs at 6-star is nuts. This guy is extremely good. Gotta get him. S tier for sure. Next up, we have Pandora's Actor. This guy, D tier, question mark. I think he's potentially a bit underrated. With the stun team really coming in and tamping down the power, I think, of the counter team, I think he's definitely D tier. Before, if counter team was still like just dominating the meta, I would say maybe C tier, simply because he has the ability to remove buffs really well, which, as I just mentioned, removing buffs against the counter team is pretty good. But for now, nobody's running Pandora's Actor. D tier. First seat, C tier. It's a little tough to say on this guy. Pretty much nobody has him at 6-star yet. We've only had 2 seasons of PvP or whatever, 3 seasons or something like that. So pretty much nobody has his Arclight up more than at level like 3 or whatever at this point and stuff too. So it's tough to say really how good he caps out at. But as I said earlier, single target chase assist not doing so great right now. Has had potential, I think, similar to Pandora's Actor, to be a tier up if the counter team was stronger, being able to bypass like shield wall and stuff. But currently C tier, almost nobody's playing him. Next up, we have Henry, who was pretty good last season, but I'm going to put down in D tier this season, honestly. The stun team is good, but her stun is unreliable. It's random. She is quite good, but has fallen off, I think, pretty significantly as new healers and stuff have been released and better stun units have been released. So Henry, sadly, D tier. Next up is PDL at B tier. Very solid, but has substitutes, right? As a tank, he's a good tank, but does nothing super special. The only thing that's somewhat special about him is the stun at 6-star, which can, slot him in very well to the stun teams, but is, I think, someone that can be subbed out. You're typically already running a Yuri as a tank on the stun team. Maybe having him as a backup in case they ban your Zaryusu and you don't have an Ego Aura or something like that. If you've got him at 6-star, he's a good backup. But for the most part, PDL can be subbed out. You could definitely do without him. Next up, we have Healer Mare, who's going into B tier. Healer Mare quite good. I'm actually a little bit tempted to put Ego Aura up into A tier. Actually, yeah, we're gonna put like the healer Mare, sorry, up into A tier. The debuff cleanse is nuts on this unit, to be frank. And with the stun team being really good, if you can build him with nuts ER and just always be able to cleanse your whole team, seems pretty good. I've definitely seen a number of people running him, especially as a good slot into the counter lineup. Next up, we have Ego Aura, who is slotting into A tier. Very good stunner. Again, some could maybe argue she should be in B tier because PDL or something could be subbed in, but Ego Aura is just she has a very consistent stun and can stun with her ultimate as well, a little bit more randomly. So the high roll chance on this, I think, just like kind of puts her a little bit over the top in terms of the stun meta. So you definitely would want an Ego Aura if you can. Next up is Tank Cocytus, who S tier. This guy made counter a thing, basically. Made the counter team playable, really, in PvP. If, the current meta is kind of rock, paper, scissors. You've got, your OTK, AoE mage, which can beat the stun teams. Then assuming you can go faster, of course. It's still a bit of a speed race there. Then you've got the stun teams beating the counter teams, and then you've got the counter teams beating the mage teams. So there's a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors. Essentially, you want to be bringing all three teams. If you're bringing a counter team, you gotta have Cocytus on your lineup, or people just aren't going to take your counter lineup very seriously, to be honest. And you probably will not win many matches with it, to be fair. This guy is just super busted. Especially at 6-star, being able to save other units on your team. That 23 turn or whatever cooldown on that ability seems really long, but the counter team is tanky. I've definitely procced it more than once. He's very good. Next up is Pestonia. I was gonna put in B tier along with the healer Mare, but I'm actually gonna put her up in A tier. Her use in the stun team as kind of a flex roll, basically just a second copy of Freeze Lizard, is pretty busted, in my opinion. One thing you can do with this combo as well, so she, with her ultimate, guaranteed reduces a cooldown, and then has like a 50% chance to reduce a random cooldown again. If you actually don't use his buff ability, then there's only one ability on cooldown. So if you do proc that second cooldown, it's guaranteed going to make his ultimate active again for the second time. So that lets you freeze 2 units, put 2 stacks of cold on pretty much everybody. So then, he can just come in on his next turn and one-tap somebody frozen again. So Pestonia has some really good synergies with the stun team that is pretty unique to her as a healer, that I'm going to put her at A tier. Next up is Idle Shell Tier, who is going to be another A tier unit. Idle Shell Tier does a buttload of damage, similar to these other AoE mages, but one thing that's kind of unique about Shell Tier is on her middle ability, the buff block is particularly good currently versus the counter teams. If you kind of want to hedge your bets a bit and maybe bring like one mage and a stunner or two and whatever, she's a really good option because the buff block will stop the indomitable procs from these guys, which is very key. So if you can get the buff block applied when you kill them or before you kill them, then they won't stop themselves from dying, right? They'll actually die. So quite good. In addition, she just does far and away more damage than either of these. She's super busted. Just very, very good unit. Next up is Dami Mami Yuri, who I am going to put in B tier. This might be a bit controversial, but I do think, I've definitely run my counter team where, either Yuri or Brain has been banned and, just like put in the Lizard or something and been perfectly fine. So she is very, very strong if she's kind of the main buffer that you really want to, be dispelling and stuff on the counter team. But yeah, again, I think you can run the counter team with or without her. She's kind of swappable with some of the other units. So B tier for Yuri. Last up, we have Maid Albedo, who I am going to put into B tier ish. Maybe should be C tier, but again, chase assist, single target damage units are not super hot right now unless you're freezing stuff. So, yeah, she's kind of similar with like Momon and Chase Aura here. Fills a similar sort of role, but is still quite a bit higher damage than those, where I think it's a little bit more justifiable in playing her than some of the other ones. But very borderline in my opinion on Maid Albedo. This is my tier list. Let me know what you think. Essentially, your lineup should probably be all of these units plus, whatever of the B tier you have to fill out a AoE team, a counter team, and a stun team. At least that's my thoughts. And for the most part, that is my lineup. So here's my lineup. So that's it, everybody. Let me know what you think. I am sure some of these picks are going to be somewhat controversial, but those are my thoughts going into the top 32 rounds. So we'll see you in the Pinnacle Challenge. Please like, subscribe. I'll talk to you later.